Hey, what's up guys? In this video today, I'm going to be showing you how you can automate your entire SEO workflow using Claude. Now, in this example today, we're going to be using Anthropic's latest model release, which is Opus 4.7. Now, if I jump over into Ahrefs, we've been using Claude to help rank this client for a number of keywords. So this keyword here, you can see is at position 6. This one's at position 1. This one's at position 5. And the best thing about these keyword rankings, if I jump into their GA4, is not only are their sessions up by 62%, but more importantly, their leads are up by 45%. So from these keywords, they've helped generate a total of 868 form fills in the last 90 days. Now, if you comment Claude SEO in the comment box down below and subscribe to the channel, I will send you a link to a Notion board that looks a little bit like this. Now this Notion board contains all the show notes and all the prompts that I've ever created for a YouTube video. If you jump into the first link, which is how to automate your SEO with Claude, you can get direct access to the skill and the prompts that I'm going to be taking you through today. Now, the second thing that I'm going to be taking you through today, and arguably this is just as important as the first point, is the biggest mistake that I see when people try and use AI with their SEO. If you don't know how to use AI with SEO, and if you implement the prompt that I'm going to give you in step 1 incorrectly, you do risk the possibility of a Google penalty and ultimately nuke your domain, have it pulled from the Google index, never to be ranked again. So do stick around to really understand how to avoid the most common mistakes that I see users go through when trying to implement AI with SEO. And finally, if you do stick around to the end, look, I've been in SEO for the best part of 10 or 11 years. I know verbatim how to rank a site. If you stay until the very end of the video, I'll give you a couple of bonus tips that can really help supercharge your SEO and give you the best possible chance of ranking for the keywords that are going to drive those leads and generate the revenue from your SEO efforts. So let's firstly take you through the prompts that we're going to be using and just break down what it's actually instructing Claude to do. So the first thing it's going to do is ask you a number of upfront qualifying questions. This is to really understand the context of the business, the primary keyword, the domain you're trying to rank. It's also trying to get things like tone of voice. It's trying to get EEAT, so proof that you are a trusted source in the category that you're trying to rank in. This essentially builds a bit of a context window that Claude needs to really ensure that the output matches your style, your tone, and again, gives you the best possible chance of ranking for the keywords that you're essentially trying to rank for. What it will also do is take the domain URL and have a look for any internal links. It might also ask you for a target URL. You know, if you're really trying to go after one particular page or improve the ranking of a particular page, then it'll obviously ask you for that and it'll look to point those internal links back to that page. It'll also qualify the type of content that we're going to create. It's then got a bit of a breakdown on the tone of voice, so how it structures the tone of voice and how Claude infers that from your site. It will then use data for SEO, and I've given you a bit of a step-by-step as to how to set this up if you've never set this up before. So I highly recommend checking that additional sheet out if you don't have the Data for SEO MCP connected. And it will use the Data for SEO to crawl the SERP, extract the top 2 or 3 competitors. It will then look for things like the NLP, so the patterns of phrases within that content that it estimates Google is looking at to essentially rank that site. And without getting too much into the weeds or too technical with this, it will essentially look at all these different patterns within a site, and then it will give them a weighting based on how frequently they appear, how high up in the page they are, whether they're used as headings throughout the content, and essentially use these weightings to give a score to the different terms or phrases that it finds within the competitor URLs that it's scraped. So essentially every time it creates the content, it will be data driven based on the URLs that are ranking on the SERP. And I think this is so important. It's one of the key mistakes that I see is too many people just one-shot content from the likes of Claude with no data-backed evidence that that content should be written in that specific way. So we want to try and get as data specific about our content as we can. It then gives a bit of a breakdown as to how it sort of finds and determines the types of internal links that it should be going after. And essentially we'll create a small map to really plan out where those internal links and the key sort of commercially aligned pages are that sit across your site. So for example here, like solution pages, feature pages, service pages, a pricing page. These are all pages that bring actual revenue to the sites. We want to make sure that we're trying to find ways to internally link to those pages. We also want to make sure that where we can, we use keyword-rich anchor text. Now, again, we don't want to abuse this. We don't want to spam it, but essentially the richer the link is with the keyword that the subsequent page is linking to, the more sort of page rank that is going to be passed through that link with that keyword association. So where we can, we do want to make sure that there is some optimization of that anchor text. We then sort of set some limits around like word count, a number of internal links, and sort of various bits and pieces like that. We've then sort of got an ideal content structure type depending on the type of content that we're creating. Now, much of this will be picked up from what is ranking on the SERP. So on the SERP, if we've got listicles that are ranking at the top of the search engine, then a listicle will be created. If it's more service or platform pages, it'll be a service or platform page that'll be created. Essentially, we just want to follow what Google is liking and ranking at the moment, and essentially replicate something of that content type. You know, if we've got listicles ranking, we don't really want to then go and necessarily create like a platform page, for example. If we've got platform pages ranking, we don't necessarily want to go and create a blog or a listicle page. So we want to match what's on the what's on the SERP basically. And we've then got the EE80 mining information gap research. Now, there's been sort of contradictions in evidence as to whether this carries any weight or not. What we're essentially trying to do here is give justification that we are a trusted source in the space, and we're trying to communicate that through the content. So, you know, we're trying to provide sort of case studies or years of service in the field, maybe statistics. You know, maybe someone on our team is like a named expert, for example. Have we won any awards or accreditations? Years in operation, I mentioned that, testimonials, methodology names, and maybe even our client roster could be, you know, give us some confidence that we're good because we're working with some household brands. Now, even if maybe it is a little bit smoke and mirrors that Google say, look, this thing matters from an on-page perspective. Maybe they just use the on-page to determine this. I do think that if a reader comes across your content and they see all these things, again, that's going to build trust with the reader, and therefore they're more likely to take the action that you want them to take from that content. So I think it's super important. The second part of this is the information gap research. Again, like there's not loads of data to support that this is or even a ranking signal, let's say that. But the theory here is that we bring new information to the SERP that isn't frequently mentioned or mentioned at all in the top 10. Again, that in theory gives Google an incentive to rank your content because you're bringing new information for the reader. So again, that's a better user experience because they're not just getting the same regurgitated, spun article that maybe a few of the competitors are writing about, but actually you're bringing something new to the table. And in theory, they might like that. Like, again, there's not been a great deal of evidence to support that it's verbatim. An information gap will rank you above a competitor that is maybe only using the same information that's already available on the SERP. But again, I think it's good value for a reader to add maybe a different sort of framing of a certain subject area. So we like to try and pull some information gaps. So, you know, we'll go through things like Reddit threads. We'll use our clients' sort of subject knowledge expertise in the area to give us those information gaps. And this is where the kind of AI assistance works best with an expert, because they will have on the ground experiences that we can bring into our articles that the AI may not, or very highly likely will not pick up. And then when we get to that point, we've essentially done all the planning, we've done all the SERP scraping, competitor analysis, the NLP analysis and mapping, the internal link decisions, the EE80 and the information gaps. And then once we have all that, then we go through and we write the content. We then got a very strict cadence around how the content is scoped. So essentially what we're trying to do is we're trying to give as much value above the fold as possible. So where we can, we're actually going to try and answer the question. We're going to give a key takeaways. If we've got a long listicle of maybe 10 competitors that we are analyzing against, we want to give the user maybe in a nice sort of light box at the start, who is the number one recommended, let's say, supplier in this case, and why is that the case? And then if the reader wants more context, more of the information, that's when they can go further down the page. The best thing about this is that it's not just from a reader perspective or a Google perspective that they like that. AIs like that as well. If AIs can retrieve that information far quicker, that means that the cost for them will go down, which means that they are more likely to surface you in an AI. So for example, you're more likely to be cited in ChatGPT, et cetera, right? So trying to give the value above the fold is absolutely integral when curating content for SEO and for AI models in 2026. And then essentially what it does, it just shows how it's going to use all the information that it's been given to create that content. But as I said, a lot of this is going to be lifted from the SERP. Now, as we go down here, we've got a couple of rules, call it the AI isms, that we want to try and avoid. So, you know what AI content looks like. I know what AI content looks like. We don't want our content to sound like AI because the value of it is going to feel diminished, even if not from Google, but from a user perspective. If they see M dashes limited everywhere, if they see phrases such as this, it's important to know that it's not just X, but Y in today's fast-paced world. You know all the phrases, okay? This is an ever-evolving list. I'll probably jump back to this in 6 months, and this list will be probably, as long as my arm, if not longer. So it's ever evolving, but we want to try and dial in the tone of voice as much as we can. And this is also really important, is that when you are giving it tone of voice documents, maybe from other articles that you've written, do not give it articles that have been created by AI, because the AI will train on another AI. And guess what? Your output will just be more AI. And that is not what we want, okay? So as we scroll down, it's going to show you how it sort of calculates the NLPs, sort of using the different weightings against the phrases, combining things like usage and where they're used within the content and where they're headings, whether they're headings and things like that. And it'll give like an arbitrage score out of 100, basically. Down below, and I think this is so important, it will fact check its own work. So if we're bringing in statistics, if we're sort of making claims, it will recheck those claims to ensure that they haven't been hallucinated, and then it will give us a link as to where those claims have come from. I think that's so important, even if you're not writing content, but you're maybe building reports, if you're pulling numbers or using statistics, things like that. Always ask Claude to go through the process of verification, because, oh God, I literally can't write with this thing, can I? It will save you a world of bother, trouble, time in future, just asking it to verify its own work. And again, I would still have the human in the loop that goes to spot check all this stuff as well. Just check some sentences, check the stats, check the sources. Between those two things, you should be pretty safe from hallucinations. Emphasis on the word should. Yeah, and as we get to the end, this is just a bit of a wrap up. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put all of this into Claude. I'm going to find an arbitrage sort of keyword that we can go after, and let's see where this takes us. Okay, so the keyword of choice is best CRM software for small business. Reason is there's high intent behind it. I'm classifying very broadly. I've not chosen an industry, but I've sort of said, given like a firmographic business size that I want to create this content for, and let's pretend that I'm a breakout CRM provider. I've vibe coded a CRM platform that I want to get in front of small businesses. So we can see a handful of URLs that are ranking here is relatively competitive, but it also means that we're going to be quite rich with the content that we can use, and subsequently the content we should be able to create will have lots of lovely data points, which is what we want. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this entire prompt and paste it into my Claude instance. Now you can download the skill and upload the skill, it's absolutely fine. I'm just going to make this as simple as possible. So if I come into my Claude instance, we're going to be using the wonderful new Opus 4.7. I'm going to hit paste. Now I mentioned throughout this that my tool of choice is data for SEO. Reason being is that it's firstly pay-per usage, so I'm not tied into another direct debit subscription. I feel like I've got hundreds of them. But I also feel, more importantly, that their data is a little bit closer to the actual source of truth. So for example, for their keyword research, they use the Google Ads Planner to get volumes out of Google. This isn't like an estimate that you get from like an Ahrefs or a SEMrush or something like that. This is actual Google data that we're using. So it's a little bit closer to that actual source of truth, which is really what we want. We don't want to be making SEO decisions on guesstimate data. So yeah, I love data for SEO. And we're going to be connecting it via the MCP from Claude. Now, if you want to set this up, if you jump into the step-by-step that I've created, which is essentially just how to set up data SEO MCP with Claude, I've given you two options. So the first one's on the Claude desktop. That's the one that we're going to be using. Second one is you can implement it using Claude Code if you're a little bit more comfortable doing that. And if you're unaware what an MCP is, an MCP very simply just allows Claude to talk and interact with other third-party platforms. So it's just the connection that allows Claude to understand the data that sits in one of these software tools. So for example, if I press the plus and I go to connectors, and I go to manage connectors, you can see on the left-hand side all my preset connectors. So Claude can instantly go and connect with these. These ones down here are the ones that I've set up locally. Now, Claude does already have some almost like pre-built MCPs. So for example, Google Drive, Google Calendar, Gmail, for example. Data for SEO isn't one of those, which is why I've given that step-by-step. But the MCPs are usually quite straightforward to set up. So we've got the Data for SEO one set up down here. Oh, hopefully I've just got to hit paste on that. And what I'm going to do is just say keyword, best CRM software for small business in the UK. I'm going to give it a little bit more context. Use the attached prompt to help create the content that targets the keyword that I've just listed. Down that a little bit back to front, and then we're going to hit go. Now, what should happen, it should ask me a couple of qualifying questions before it begins. Okay, so it's asked, which domain is this for? It's also seen that this is a listicle style commercial keyword. I'll get it to verify that. First, even though I know that that is true, I still will want to use data for SEO to verify. So it's going to be dominated by comparison roundups. I need to know who we're writing this for. It's actually given some suggestions as to, is it for a client or a new prospect? It's then asked, we want a content brief or full written article, tone of voice, EAT, and all this good stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pretend that we are, in this instance, Pipedrive, which is, again, a CRM software. It's certainly on the up. So let's pretend that we're Pipedrive and we are creating content for this domain. Okay, so I basically said that the site is Pipedrive. I want a full written article, use the domain for the tone of voice. I quite like this as well. Quick note, it's a strategic fit. Because Pipedrive is a CRM, it has to either rank itself, number one, justification, or two, rank competitors alongside itself. The common SEO conundrum in 2026, it's good that the skill flags it. Again, I think I've been in SEO for 10 years. All this experience, all this context that I can give it really shines through with this prompt. So yeah, this is awesome that it's almost, trying to preface the honesty angle with this as well. And I think whilst it's creating that, let's jump in. I think whilst it's creating that, let's jump into point number 2, which I mentioned that I want to discuss the biggest mistake that I see people trying to use AI when building sort of SEO workflows or content and things like that. Now, the first one, quite simply, is people spamming their domain. Okay, so this means if you have a 50-page site, do not go and create hundreds of pages. It sounds super simple, but the workflow that I've given you above should not be abused. It should not be used for spam. It should be used to help assist creating pages on a one-to-one basis. You should still use a human in the loop. And ideally, this is a subject matter expert, someone that has real experience in the category and the keyword that you're trying to go after. So do not go and create hundreds of pages if you have a 50-page site. You really need to drip feed this content in. And again, I highly, highly, highly recommend that you just get an SEO specialist to consult if you're wanting to do any of this activity. The second issue I see is essentially one-shotting AI content. Now, if I was just to ask Claude to create content for the keyword best CRM software for small business, it will create something, it will sound plausible, but there will be no data used, so it won't be calling the SERP, it won't be looking at the competitors, it won't be using your tone of voice, it won't have any internal links, it won't have all the things that AI has made life much easier for us with. Now, again, I think this is super important. This is why AI should be used to assist. So the Claude bot, let's say this is Claude, we should be plugging it into an Ahrefs or a data for SEO. It should be checking competitors. It should be checking the SERP for the intent of the keywords, and then from that, we should then be essentially using it to create like the NLPs and calculate like scoring. And then we should be feeding it, our business context, and our tone of voice and all of that. And it should use all of this to then create the content. And I think that's where our AI is so powerful, is we can plug it into all these data sources. Okay. And then stacking on the human with this. So the subject matter expert means that the output is that much more powerful. And that's why we can get the results that we do, because we combine all of these things. Let's jump back into Claude and see how we're getting on. Okay, cool. So it's given us the tone profile. It's given us the point of view, the sentence length, paragraphs. It's called the SERP. It's given the competitors. It's determined which competitors it should go after. So it's rightly ruled out Reddit. Again, we're not a forum. We are a CRM. So we don't want to compare ourselves to a forum. And it's also ruled out the HubSpot page because it's a product page, and what it's wanting to create is a listicle. So again, it's understood the intent of the competitors, which is awesome. It's then hosted some people also ask questions, which is cool. It's now crawling the 6 sort of approved competitors, and all of these look good. As you can see, their blog, best CRM software small business, best CRM software small business, best CRM software small business. You can see the theme of the articles that rank that sort of follow suit. And that's what we want it to do. We don't want it to measure against like Reddit or, government domains and things like that. Okay, it's now pulled the word count. It's given us the format. It's given us like a medium word count and the target we should aim for. And then it's summarized the competitor findings, which is cool. It's then given us the content plan. So what to look for in a small business. All the headings, the internal links. And again, we want to make sure that we can verify that as well. So look at this vendor honesty flag. How often do you see AI being honest? How cool is this, right? The piece will rank Pipedrive transparency alongside honest trade-offs for the top 7 CRMs. Pipedrive goes in the list positioned as best for visual pipeline management, which is consistent how every third-party listicle already describes it. Not number 1 by default. I'm not going to argue with that. I think that's awesome. And then before I write, 2 things to confirm. Target URL slug. Yeah, I think that looks good. Vendor honesty problem. Yeah, let's keep it as honest as possible. And yeah, let's go ahead and create the content. And I think that's the good thing about Opus 4.7. It will nitpick into those intricacies, which is really cool. But again, as I said, this skill was built on 10 or 11 years of SEO experience, knowing what works across hundreds of clients in some of the most competitive markets, to be honest. So, it should be as no surprise, but well, there you go. I still get surprised, right? Okay, it looks like we're very close. So this is a 4,750 word article. It's passed both of the copy rules that have been put in place. It's got a tone profile matching. It's scoring a 90.3 based on what it's seen. GBP English throughout, GBP pricing. That's good because we said specifically the UK SERP. The EAT proof points are verified against Pipedrive's own site. So it's going through this verification, as I said, is so important. And the final part, the vendor honesty framing is in place. So Pipedrive ranked number 1 with honest trade-offs. And again, I think if you're creating this kind of content, you have to be honest because you need to build that trust and that rapport with the reader. It's not just thinking about it from like a Google crawler point of view, but actually from the person that is going to be reading it as well. Okay, it's looking like it's wrapping up the last sort of final points, and it's about to put it into a document for us. And look, if you've got to this point, I'd really appreciate it if you could subscribe to the channel. That tells me that this is the type of content, these are the types of videos that you guys want to see more of. And just as we do that, on the right hand side, so of course it's in Session Media Branding, which is the agency that we run. Let's have a look at this. So it's got a nice article overview. It's given us target, URL, the content type, projected NLP score, the word count, the tone, and then it's broken down the tone profile, EEAT and information gaps. So let's have a look at some of these information gaps. So how to read a CRM listicle, so no competition in the top 10 addresses, vendor bias, which is really interesting. So it's actually given us content on how to essentially read competitor listicles, sort of saying that these are going to be biases, by the way, and I think that's a really nice angle to take. Real cost for CRM, so competitors list headline prices. This section covers per user compounding, tier gazing, implementation feed, add-ons. amber flags requiring client verification for publish. So these are the things that we just need to confirm. And this is why you absolutely must always get a human to go through, tidy this up, get a subject matter expert to really sort of refine it and just add that extra 10, 20%. Never just straight up publish this, from this document using other software. Just be super cautious when using content that has been curated from AI. Now, of course, I'm not going to read through all of this, but let's just have a look at the structure. So it's got a nice table here showing the 7 best CRM. It's then gone through and assessed each of them, which is really cool. The information gap here, so how to read a CRM listicle, including this one, how to choose the right CRM, and then it goes into some FAQs. Now, what I'm going to do is a couple of things. So firstly, re-verify the competitor pricing and plans, and just to make sure that that's accurate. And the second part is ensure that you've included the internal links as actual internal links throughout the document. You don't need to regenerate all of the document, but just find the strategic places to add those internal links. And the verification, you don't need to give proof of the verification in the document, just put it into the chatbot between us. So again, there's just a few sort of things that I've noticed. I couldn't see the internal links. They might be buried in here. Maybe I've just missed them, but I can't see them. And I also just wanted to re-verify some of the competitor pricing and things like that, because that's the worst thing, is it hallucinates on the pricing, or it uses old pricing from old training data. It's not accurate. That isn't going to help the user, and it will be a big sort of slap in the face to anyone that's sort of reading this. And again, you're going to build the trust. So it's going to go through and just re-verify that. And you'll notice that what I've said is don't regenerate the whole document. That will use up a shed loads of tokens. So, I want it to be as economical as it can when it rolls out those internal links. So I might just choose a handful of paragraphs and put them in, but let's see what it comes out with. Okay, so as it's wrapping up some of the competitor re-verification, you'll notice that it's picked up a couple of things. So where it can't find pricing, it's essentially gone to external sources to get that pricing. So capture a good example here, start at $18 a month. GetApp shows $18. We have £15. It's actually said that that's wrong, although it's sort of close to $18, but it's updating it to 14 based on the Capterra pricing. So again, it's it's good at sort of finding workarounds. 4 of them were okay. A couple of them needed a bit of a change. So the HubSpot one, it's updated from 9 to 18. So it clearly found a bit of an issue there. And apparently that was old pricing and not new pricing. So because HubSpot didn't have actual pricing that it could find on the site, again, it had to go off of, old or third-party listicles, I should say. So it's done that, it's re-verified, it's updated the documents, and now it's gone through and it's starting to rebuild with the internal links. I'm just going to hit continue on this, and let's see whereabouts it places those wonderful internal links that are so vital to helping us rank other pages for other keywords outside of the one that we're creating here today. Amazing. And just lastly, it's now identified the 6 internal links that it wants to include. This all looks highly relevant, and placed them all. And I think that just about wraps it up. So if you've enjoyed this video and you've followed until the end, I really appreciate it. Do hit subscribe to the channel. And I'm also really curious to know if you've been building with Claude. As I said, if you want access to the workflow that we've gone through today, do comment Claude SEO in the comment box below. I'll send you a link to the notification board so you can sign up and start doing this for yourself. But finally, don't spam this. You'll nuke your domain. And other than that, I will see you on the next video.